This meeting is being recorded.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Happy February 1st. Welcome to the Care Farming Network's monthly member gathering for February. My name is Casey. I'm pretty new to the Care Farming Network. I'm the new program coordinator and really excited to meet you all. Kate, who usually facilitates these, is out on vacation, I think. So glad for the opportunity to say hi and meet so many awesome network members. Um, Feel free to keep saying hello in the chat if you would like. Um, just sharing your name and where you're from, and if you belong to a farm or an organization. Um, I'll just briefly explain monthly member gatherings. If you've been on these before, you probably already know this, but if you're brand new, welcome. We have a monthly member gathering every first Thursday of the month. They're always free to members. We talk about different topics every month. And these gatherings are part of the Care Farming Network's commitment to supporting the network and you all, and working together to improve care farming practices. These are always recorded, and you can find previous gatherings posted on our past events page on our website, which is carefarmingnetwork.org. So our topic for today is volunteer management and engagement. I'm really excited to have Becca Roe here to talk to us about that. Becca will present for about half of our time together, and then we'll have a good chunk of time left for discussion and Q&A. So I'll let Becca tell us more about herself and her role and her farm, but just very briefly, Becca is the program manager at Red Wiggler Community Farm in Maryland. And I just had the pleasure actually of visiting this farm and getting a tour and learning about all the work that the team does and that Becca does. So she does a million amazing things, one of which is manage the volunteer program at the farm. She's been at the farm for 3 years, and they're doing some really amazing things, and you're all in for a treat. So you're invited to put questions in the chat along the way, but we'll let Becca share the presentation that she's prepared before we open up to Q&A. So feel free to throw things in the chat, but we'll wait till the end to address questions and get into some conversation. All right, without further ado, Becca, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Casey. Hey, everybody, it's just so amazing to see all the names and faces popping up from all over the country. It just puts a big smile on my face. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and I did practice this, so it should be seamless. All right, give me a thumbs up. Does this look good? This work? All right, we're off to the races. So like Casey said, my name is Becca, and I'm the program manager as of 1 week ago at Red Wiggler Community Farm. We're located in Germantown, Maryland, which is in Montgomery County, right outside of DC. I'm really excited to share some information with you all about our volunteer and service learning program. And I'm also really looking forward to learning more about your programs. And I know there's just so much that we can learn from each other. So quickly, I really believe that pictures tell 1,000 words. I wanted to take a moment to explain this photo that I chose. This is just like a summer morning a couple of years ago during our daily morning meeting under our mulberry tree, our gathering spot. And so this is like a typical morning at Red Wiggler, big old circle outside filled with all different kinds of people ready to tackle the day and work hard together. So I just love this picture. All right. So before I dive into the volunteer program, I want to share a background of what Red Wiggler is, who we are. Some of you are our neighbors, Telmar and Langton Green. Others, Alaska, you may have never heard of us. So at a glance, we're a sustainable care farm where people with and without disabilities come together to work, learn, and grow healthy food. That's our mission statement. And it's really the driving force behind our programs. Our vision is to create fertile ground to nourish a healthy and inclusive community. We're a nonprofit farm located, as I said, in Montgomery County, Maryland. We were founded in 1996, and I just did the math. That means this is our 28th year in existence, which is mind-boggling. We farm veggies and herbs and flowers organically on a 12-acre campus that we lease from the county park system. So we have 5 programs, starting from left to right. Our grower program, that is meaningful employment for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Currently, we have 15 growers on staff who earn minimum wage or higher and work on vocational and life skills development. We have an education program where we provide learning opportunities for youth and adults with and without disabilities through field trips, farm tours, workshops, and events. Our volunteer program, obviously, which I'm going to talk about in great length. Our CSA program, so we provide organic vegetables to the general public, and we keep a minimum of 50% of that yield to be distributed to low-income households. So we have a gourmet CSA in which we serve approximately 130 households between May and November, as well as a thriving farm-to-food bank program where we supply local food banks, community organizations, and schools with produce weekly. Our last program, none of you know of, I'm sure, called the Care Farming Network, and they're the ones responsible for getting us connected today. I won't talk more about that, but alrighty. Volunteer program, the role of volunteers. Let's dive deeper. So the goal of this program is to provide inclusive opportunities for both youth and adults with and without disabilities that promote public knowledge, environmental stewardship, sustainable farming, healthy eating, and active living. That's our program goal officially. And so volunteers at Red Wiggler are involved in nearly everything we do. They're a really important part of supporting our grower staff during field work and other work that we do. So making sure that the programming is really inclusive. Our volunteers provide support for goal development and skill building. And they're also forming the talent pipeline of those who might one day become growers and other staff at our farm and other farms. And of course, they help us get the job done. That's very important. Our volunteers are harvesting, weeding, transplanting, folding big tarps, putting on row cover on very windy, cold mornings and blazing summer days. Without the help of volunteers, our capacity would really lessen enormously. I cannot emphasize enough how important they are to us. So who makes up the program at Red Wiggler? I've broken it down into 5 different categories. So we have our corporate groups, people coming as part of a larger company or organization. Here in Montgomery County, we're situated in an area close to lots of biotech companies and pharmaceutical companies, as well as, of course, myriad government agencies and think tanks and law firms. But we also welcome groups from local Starbucks stores and supermarkets. We welcome groups from many schools all throughout the area, private and public, as well as summer camps. And then that third group category in the top right are those that are coming from local DDA agencies, as well as service providers for adults with disabilities. So this past year, we welcomed more groups from that category than in years previous, which is awesome. But we were really barely able to meet the demand from these groups who, require a little bit more work to match with really meaningful farm tasks, jobs that are really appropriate for their skills and their experience. So continuing to work on that puzzle. So moving on, the individuals who make up our volunteer pool are super important. So these are the people, these are adults and kids and their retirees, their middle schoolers, their teachers on their summer break, and everyone in between. So they come on their own accord, and they go through all the intake steps that I'll lay out in just a little bit. We refer to some of our volunteers as super volunteers, like Ellen, who's pictured here. She contributed over 200 hours this past season alone, which is incredible. And so these are the people who really form deep relationships with our grower staff. They come once a week or twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. And they're also more likely to support us in other ways as well. So they keep up with us during these cold winter months. They become donors or even board members. I also just want to mention that we have pretty strong ties to our local institutions, which has helped to solidify a great volunteer base. So our local community college and school system have been amazing and really instrumental at sending us high quality volunteers. And we've partnered with the county's work-based learning program for high school sophomores and juniors. That's also been really excellent. We have students commit to at least 50 hours during the summer with us. Final category are our specialized volunteers. So these are people who volunteer their time in other ways off the field usually. So pictured here is Sanal, who helps support our CSA pickup on Wednesdays. We also have individuals who support educational programming, who help with greenhouse repair, tractor maintenance, even someone assisting with IT support at the moment. So this is definitely a category I want to continue growing. So there's a lot of potential here. All right. I'm not going to bore you all with lots of charts and graphs, but I do have just a few. I want to show kind of the scope of our program. This here is a breakdown of those groups that I was talking about and individual participants. So in 2023, we had 102 individual volunteers come out to the farm and 388 group participants. So that's nearly 500 overall, or exactly 500, almost. And it's about an 80-20 split. So really just want to share how wide our reach is. But I also want to emphasize this number is not something that's, I think, good or bad. It's something that works for us at the scale we are. But these numbers are could look very different for different farms. This chart breaks down volunteer hours by type. So as you can see, individuals are that bright green. They contributed many, many, many more hours in total than the group participants. So like Ellen, I mentioned, but other super volunteers contributed over 100 hours each, which is awesome. I think this is an important metric only because it shows how much of the programmatic time is dedicated to individuals versus groups. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about other outputs that we measure in more detail later on. Okay. So, volunteer intake steps and data management. I'm going to zoom in now on the program management side of things. And talk a little bit about the different steps that it takes to become a volunteer with us. So first things first, the graphic shows these 5 steps. A prospective volunteer will sign up for an on-farm, in-person volunteer orientation via our website. We require in-person orientations for several reasons. So first, it's an opportunity for us to get to know them. Do they seem aware of and comfortable with the sort of physicality of farming, of walking up and down uneven aisles, of bending? Are they listening? Are they paying attention? Are they treating others with respect and courtesy? It's also an opportunity for the prospective volunteers to get to know us. How do you get to the farm? What's the parking situation like? What does the farming actually entail? And I've found personally that meeting with people face to face beforehand is a really important way to communicate rules and expectations, like what to wear, what to bring. It's just so much easier to skip or skim this information online. So once they've attended an orientation at the farm, there aren't huge red flags. They complete an application form where they share emergency contact information, prior experience, whether or not they need accommodation, and submit a background check if they're 18 or older. Once that comes back clear, then they get access to the volunteering platform that we use called Give Pulse. I put shifts up there about 2 to 3 weeks in advance. And folks can register for any shift, but this is important. They're only allowed to show up for a shift if they're officially approved. So we want to maintain a level of control while also making the process more clear and transparent for volunteers. So it's more like matching. So volunteers can try to register for every single day of the week if they have the availability, but we only approve them for the shift that's the best fit. So they also have a waitlist function, which is really helpful, for when people inevitably cancel. So just to note that this whole process is just for those individual volunteers that I was describing. Group volunteers just fill out a group visit form on Google, where they just provide details about who they want to bring, what's the group size, their proposed date, all that. So data management. So all the information that I mentioned that we collect currently, we have volunteers complete a paper application form ahead of time or during their orientation. GivePulse collects their names and emails and phone numbers, as does our CRM, which is called Civi. So this is very much a work in progress. That's like there's stuff floating everywhere. But we opt for safety when it comes to, we want to be really mindful of where we store individuals' personal and demographic information. I'm so not an expert on data management and security, and this is an area where I would really love to talk more with other people about how you manage your volunteers' personal information later on. All right, so diving deeper into sort of the day-to-day management. Prior to launching GivePulse last year, we managed the program mostly via email and phone and Google Calendar. This gave us a lot of control, but it wasn't efficient, and it was really prone to human error. So I want to make this very clear that this is not an ad for GivePulse at all. Before we started using them, I was doing comparison research into other care farms and farm nonprofits. It seemed like everywhere I looked, people were using something different. So I would just say, like, do your research, see what works for your budget, your needs. From my experience, they've provided pretty good service, and the platform does most of the things that I want it to. But I'm still sort of working through some kinks there. It's definitely improved our program efficiency, cross-training ability. It's improved volunteers' individual accountability a lot. They receive automated emails 24 hours in advance of their shift, which is awesome. Not scrambling to send them reminder emails anymore. And they can see their own schedule online. So I've received great feedback, mostly from volunteers. Some do, had to get used to the site. But overall, it's been a success. I'm going to talk a little bit more now about groups. So group volunteers can really be a huge asset to your farm. In my experience, there are tons of organizations out there, schools, companies, government agencies that include volunteering as part of their benefit package, their company culture, their curriculum. And so I've been trying to position us as a place for corporate team building, which can be really a win-win, right? You get coworkers who hang out face-to-face, get out of the office, while we get extra hands to tackle big, challenging tasks. For example, pictured here is a team from the Aspen Institute, which is a big think tank, that came out on a very steamy day last September, last year. So in just a couple hours, they helped us take out a whole field of really heavy tomato stakes from one of our fields, and that's a really intense job. If you've ever done it before, it would have taken our normal crew like at least 3 times as long to finish it. So one of my big suggestions for you all, if you haven't already made those kinds of connections, is really get out there and get the word out to your local firms, agencies, companies, that your farm is a great place for them to build community and to give back. So in 2023, we welcomed 30 unique groups to the farm, some of whom came more than once. we averaged at least a group per week of the growing season. And all of those visits were inclusive of our grower staff. And we are continuing to highlight and increase the percentage of those group visits that included neurodivergent participants. So right now it's about a third. Sorry. See this, whoops. All right. So moving away from the nuts and bolts management side of our program, I want to talk about engagement. Big word. What does it mean? That's a big question on my mind. I don't have all the answers by any means. As I've sort of thought about this program over the years, so I tend to come back to this idea of quality versus quantity. How much should we emphasize the quality of time that an individual spends with us versus the quantity of people that we can get to the farm? In other words, how much should we emphasize to our volunteers the importance of coming a lot? How do we do that while also making sure that we keep an open door to new people? So I see it as a balancing act, really, between encouraging repeat visits while allowing volunteers to try it out. And I don't want to like ding our program for something that's natural, which is you try something out, low risk, and you decide, hey, it's not for me, right? So I don't necessarily think that it's a perfect program and the most engaging program if we had 30 volunteers who each came 30 times. I want there to be, room for the high schooler who comes 3 times and decides that farming is not his thing, especially in July in Maryland, but forms a meaningful connection with one of our growers or another volunteer, or realizes he likes using his hands, and that is meaningful to me. So I think about this a lot, and the best I can say is it's a balance. So what are some other metrics that we track to see if our program is successful, if we're creating meaningful experiences? As a nonprofit, we quarterly track a series of program outputs that are supposed to tell us if we're on the right track and we're meeting our program goals, and help our development team tell a story about who's here. Over the years, these metrics have shifted a bit, and we use the term bean counting. Basically, what are just like the raw numbers we're counting? What are, those numbers I shared earlier, just the number of people here, hours spent here. That's a little bit more of a bean counting, like just counting things for the sake of counting. But what are the metrics that help us tell a richer story? So that's what I've been considering. So listed here are some examples of different metrics that we're tracking now that I think tell a little bit of a deeper story. So average visits per volunteer, average hours per volunteer, volunteers who come 5 times or more over the course of the season or spend 20 hours with us. How many of our community outings are inclusive of volunteers, or how many volunteers go on those outings? And then what are people telling us in their surveys? So surveying is a whole other conversation that we can dig into if you want. Surveying is really challenging. Right now, we have 2 separate surveys for different cohorts. So those people that come to the farm once, twice, a couple times, either part of a group or on their own, they just get a short 3-question, did you enjoy your experience? Did you learn something new about farming? Did you learn anything from working with a grower? And then the volunteers that meet that threshold of coming 5 times or more, then are given a more thorough survey at the end of the season that gives them way more opportunity to share what they've learned and who they've connected with and their favorite memories and how they feel about X, Y, and Z. And so the survey, especially that long form survey, has been one of the best ways to make sure that we're on track, and really has proven that you come more than 5 times, you're having just a much richer experience. So you may notice that we don't have a metric on this page about retention, so volunteers that come back season after season. I can find those numbers fairly easily using our database where we make sure we're tracking the hours people spend with us. But so far it hasn't felt like something meaningful to share with the community. So I am curious if any of you have different metrics of tracking engagement in your volunteer communities. If you've figured something out that really speaks to the success of your program. And so finally pictured here is the whiteboard from our last volunteer appreciation lunch last summer. We've tried all sorts of volunteer appreciation events over the years, and I haven't found one that's like perfect. So I'd love to hear more from you all too about what's worked for you. What do you do for your volunteers that makes them appreciated, that keeps them coming back, and has gotten good feedback? All right. So kinks we're working out, changes for this coming year. So there's lots of little ways that I want to continue improving this program. First things first, taking GivePulse, our system, our platform. I want to continue making it work for everybody. So not just individuals, for groups, for volunteers with disabilities. I want to make it as efficient and fair as it can be. Like I said, I wanna work on a more efficient way of serving our youth volunteers in the summer. I want to take advantage of additional specialized volunteers, including those from Catch a Fire, which is an incredible resource. If none of you have ever heard of it, it's a website, it's a platform that connects really specialized volunteers with nonprofits, specifically people with experience in marketing, website development, IT support, all that good stuff. So not necessarily like an organization that's going to match the perfect field volunteer for your farm, but they're awesome. I'm also working right now on creating a sort of compare and contrast document for the pricing structure of our volunteer visits, sort of looking around at similar organizations. So do we charge the same for public and private schools? Do we charge more for large corporations versus small companies per person? Is it a blanket fee? So these are things that I'm looking into. And again, would love to talk. And so on that note, I have a million questions for all of you, which of course probably don't have time to answer all of these, but these are just the things that were popping into my head as I was putting together this presentation and really thinking about, oh my gosh, all these care farmers in one room who have volunteer programs or want to increase theirs. What are the questions that nag at me? So do you have volunteer opportunities that are open to everybody or not? And how do you prioritize who gets to volunteer, who gets those shifts? What is your intake process like? Is it just a simple Google form? Do they come out for an orientation? Do you find that something works best for you? How do you manage their data? How do you create and support community for your volunteers? How do you show them appreciation? How do you encourage retention, if at all? How much do you charge for visits? And if you use a volunteer management platform, which features do you like the best? Which do you wish it had? And I come up with 10 more questions, but I won't for the sake of this. Keep it brief. So with that, thank you all so much for listening. My contact info is here. I would love to keep in touch and swap ideas. And I'll leave you with this picture of 4 of our awesome super volunteers. These are people that come multiple times, usually once a week, if not more, who help out at the farm in many different ways, and they're just awesome. So thank you all so much, and I will pass it back over to Casey.
Thanks, Becca. That was an awesome overview. I'm actually wondering if you could keep those questions for the group up, or
Sure.
we could maybe type them into the chat.
Yeah.
But that might be nice to have. Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah.
think these questions are great. Um, so we have just about half an hour for our conversation here. So I'll invite folks to ask questions of Becca, um, or to respond and share about your own program and experiences. Maybe looking at these questions here that Becca has posed. Um, and feel free, of course, to put things in the chat, but also if you'd like to share verbally, you can um, raise your real hand or your Zoom hand and feel free to offer something. Anybody want to kick us off? I think I see Cindy. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep,
All
there
right,
you are.
so your platform, Give Pulse. So we're a therapeutic horseback riding program, and sometimes our needs are a little more immediate than yours. Your folks can seem to ask, a week or so in advance. Sometimes we need people like from morning to afternoon, but we use sign up, and it doesn't give us the kind of data we would like. We were looking more. Is this a phone app, Give Pulse, or is it just it is a phone app?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it has that capability. We currently don't use that capability, only because I found that people are relatively responsive via email because we give them more time. Like if we had something like you where we wanted people the next day, a
Right.
text blast would be better.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we're just looking for something. Typically, everyone has their phone with them, and so even last
Sure.
minute or whatever, and for it to give us good data, because once we started using sign up, then we also had a backup hand sign up, at the farm. But then they all assumed that because they signed up online, it was going to record things. But if you end up having to back out, then it doesn't, take you off actually. So it has some flaws. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Gracie.
So we're new. We're just starting. I mean, we have had a few volunteers, but we're about to launch, or if that's the right word, try advertising, promoting for more volunteers. So I'm particularly interested in the corporate visit thing. And are you charging just random human being volunteers to come and work also? That's I certainly did not consider that as even a possibility, let alone something I would do.
Well, I can speak, and if other people want to chime in, feel free. We do not charge for regular individuals at all. They're giving us so much of their time and energy.
Yeah.
The group visit fee, I should say, is also not, it's not 100% mandatory if there are extenuating circumstances. We've had schools asked to come, public schools, and say, you know what, our field trip fund is kaput for the year. Is that a barrier? And so we don't use that as a way of preventing people from coming. So the corporate fee is, I'd say it's common practice amongst nonprofits that are sites for corporate team building. Currently, we charge $250. Our suggested fee is $250, which is tax deductible, and that is for a 2 to 3 hour sort of guided program at the farm where they're volunteering. They get a mini tour. They work side by side with our growers, and then they can opt to stay for lunch, which we don't provide. But I've seen other models that do provide lunch that and sometimes they charge $100 a person, or they charge $1,000 if the corporation has a massive budget, so there's more of a sliding scale. But no, so we do not charge for individual volunteers. And then it's sort of ramp up in price depending on whether or not it's a school or a corporation.
Okay, I get it now. Can you give an example of types of even names of corporations that do this kind of thing?
Yes. Deloitte. They're a huge consulting firm. They have a big office in Northern Virginia. I know for a fact that they have a service day, like a yearly day of service. In my recollection, it's in June of every year. That may have shifted in the pandemic, but that's a day where the company says, go forth and volunteer in the community. Like they have that day. They're not expected to be in their office at all. And so like capturing that energy, that momentum is important. So Deloitte's one example. Marriott, Aspen Institute, Starbucks. In the past, we've welcomed Whole Foods. Local market here is Dawson's Market. We've gotten biotech companies like RegenX Bio, Stantec, Kyogen, all of those places. Some of them have a program that is embedded in their company. So like every employee gets 4 days of volunteering a year, or every department does 2 days of corporate team building a year. And so I joined the farm after the pandemic in 2021. And the pandemic kind of blew up a lot of those existing partnerships that we had. So I've done a fair amount of cold calling or cold emailing of just like, hey, you guys came here in 2006. We're still here. We would love for you to come back. We're a great place for your employees to come in and give back and build community, and let's talk. So I think it's definitely a ripe opportunity for care farms.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel, you're up.
Hello. I just wanted to comment. We have a great volunteer kind of pool, and we have a pretty good retention. And what we have found, we grow in greenhouses, so the demand, especially with the tomatoes, like we kind of trained our people who are interested in working in the greenhouses to be their own little team and try to get them to come on the same days. And so they're doing the same skills, so they're working together, so they have a little of that camaraderie. And then we have like the kind of the gardeners who want to do like deadheading and enjoy watering, and they're kind of their own team. So that I find has helped it they kind of work together and encourage each other, like they know they're the Wednesday team or whatever day. So that's been really nice, I think, is having them be able to work in teams as opposed to being on their own. One thing that we have a challenge with is getting our volunteers to sign in. So what we're trying to do is track the hours, because there's so many, and that we want to be able to bring that to the organization as a whole, so they can see how many hours we use for volunteers, that without them, I mean, we would be in trouble. So that's something that we're trying to hone in on. And we use Sign Up Genius for our sign up, and that's new. It works really well for our farmers market, but trying to get our volunteers who have been with us for a few years to now start using that has not been super successful. We're working on it.
Totally.
Thanks for sharing, Rachel. Sarah.
Thanks so much for sharing, everyone. I'm taking so many notes on like ideas. This is super cool. I wanted to chat a little bit about how we collect our hours data for volunteers because it's free. And I guess if you had a ton of volunteers, it might not be the most ideal, but it's really helped for us when kind of our size. We have a hydroponic greenhouse, just to give a little background, and like we have apprentices that are do paid internships here, and then we have like volunteers that can come in during certain hours in the week. We have this thing that we colloquially call the torch, but it's an Excel spreadsheet that we will put in the Excel spreadsheet, like how many hours people are here, and we track it kind of by every 15 minutes, but you could do it by 30 minutes, by an hour. I would want to like show a photo of it, but basically we can track what tasks people are doing. It will compute how many hours that is, and then it will do like a weekly view of how many hours people have. And then we have a log on Excel for every volunteer. We just pull the data we need, and then we have an Excel spreadsheet that we can input the hours in. We just look at the month, see how many hours they had, and then input that there. And that seems to work well, but I could imagine if you had a ton, that would not be the most efficient. And then we have people sign up through Slack. We just set them out with a Slack account in our like company's Slack, and they can just sign up and schedule there. Again, if you had a ton of volunteers to coordinate, might not be the most ideal or efficient, but that's a little bit of insight into our how we track volunteer hours and then report on it.
That's awesome. I've never heard of using Slack before. That's really creative. I like that. I had a follow-up question for Sarah and for Rachel. When you're saying like tracking those hours and people signing in, the challenges there, do you have them do it on their phone? Is it through an iPad? Do you have a computer set up? Like that's something that I'm thinking about for us as well.
So we have a sheet of paper at this point, which just is not, we found that our people in our farmers market use that, but then the farm going into the greenhouses, because we have these teams that know what their duties are, they just go right into the greenhouse. So sometimes that's a challenge of like even knowing that they're here. So we're trying to get them to check in with us, also sign in. So I'm thinking that the paper is not the way, and we need something. Maybe it is on the app that they can like almost do like a clock in, or that like let us know they're here, and then we actually get a notification that they're on the property, because there's just so many moving parts in the morning. So like that's something that we definitely need to improve on.
I'll touch on ours real quick. So with this Excel spreadsheet, we have someone that we assign throughout the day to check on all operations in our greenhouse. And then if it's the outdoor season and not the winter, are not covered with snow, our outdoor garden space. And we don't have a super large property, so that makes that easier since we are in an urban setting. But we have someone that's checking people, like what they're doing, if they need any help, what they're working on, and we can log that. And then we also have a reception desk. So it's just on the computer. We put someone's name in for like the weekly, monthly tab and what we're tracking hours. And then we just track for each of them. And then that person's responsible for who's ever logging during that hour or couple hours is responsible for logging who's checking in and who's checking out. And then we just have everyone in their onboarding know that they have to check in and check out at that kind of central area. But it helps that we're pretty small property. So yeah, that's ours.
I'm just looking at the conversation in the chat here. Oh, Cindy, I was just going to ask you if you would expand a little bit on the benefit of sign up versus sign up genius. And I'm seeing you said tracking hours was easier with sign up.
Yeah. I don't know all the particulars. I wasn't integral in setting that up, but we seemed to exit from Sign Up Genius rather quickly and move to Sign Up. There were just more user-friendly options for it, and then it tracked things better for us. But I was curious, has anyone ever heard of Clock It? Kind of like an online phone app that like a time clock, almost check in, check out.
No.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share about their program? Talmar Volunteering. Not sure what your actual name is.
My apologies. Hi, everyone. My name is Alina. I'm the volunteer coordinator at Talmar Horticultural Therapy Center. I heard you speak earlier about your volunteer appreciation. We have some days that we have set up. One of our larger events is Thank S'mores, and it usually happens around the summer solstice, and it's a big volunteer appreciation event where the volunteers get to come out and make their own combinations of s'mores. We had one last year. We didn't think it was going to turn out as well as it did because of the rain, but it still turned out we had a pretty good rate of individuals who came. But I was wondering, what are some other examples that you guys do for your volunteer appreciation?
Cindy and then Rachel.
We're just getting ready to have an annual appreciation luncheon. And some of our awards were like, if you're a new volunteer, you might be called Rookie of the Year, someone new that came on board and really spent a lot of hours. We're honoring someone. It's a luncheon basically with awards that are hung at our barn with nameplates on them. That's about it. I mean, we send thank you cards a lot, to volunteers for something special, but typically one event geared toward them annually.
So we do a Christmas party. Basically, it's a pizza party, and then any volunteers, all volunteers are invited, and we have music, like a couple of our staff and individuals who play instruments come, and we had a couple volunteers play music as well. So that was kind of nice, and we just pretty casual, but a bunch of pizza. We made a salad. Then we also did one day this year that we really want to bring back, was a BLT day where we had our lettuce and tomato growing, and then one of our staff had like cooked the bacon at home and brought it in and toasted bread, and that was a fun little like luncheon afternoon, very, very casual. I mean, we don't close down the farm, so it's kind of like someone's watching the register and you kind of just flop back and forth. But I always feel like I want to do more because they're so helpful for us. But yeah, those were two that stick out in my mind.
Any other appreciation strategies out there? Monthly dinners, nice, Cindy. Oh, Sarah.
We have our like own sweatshirts. So if people give about a certain amount of hours, we'll give a sweatshirt. So thank you. And then I'm sure a lot of folks do this that have like produce, but we'll just, thank you for coming by today. We especially have jalapenos right now. So if people really like spicy food, we'll give them some, or whatever they like from our folks.
Awesome. Food and swag. Other questions floating out there for Becca or for the group? Becca, I had a question for you. Maybe I'll jump in. Um, when you showed those pie charts earlier, I wasn't sure if I saw them right, but is there almost like an inverse between the amount of individual volunteers and the hours they're contributing?
Yeah, there is. So about 20% of our total volunteer pool are people who come on their own, and then they're providing about 80%, 75 to 80% of the hours. So it's total inverse. Um, and I guess after all that, we were talking about corporate visits, and they are really important, those groups. But in my mind, the individuals are really like the heart and soul of the program. Like they're the ones coming day in and day out for no money. And that is borne out in those numbers. So all of these ideas for volunteer appreciation are so awesome. I'm like scribbling notes down. I think I always get caught up. The time when we have the most volunteers around is also the time that is the most crazy at the farm, like peak summer. And it's hard to, we also have like our on-farm events that are more development focused or supporting our grower staff. And at the moment, we don't have a standalone event, like official event. And so I'm taking lots of notes from all of you. So thank you.
That's really fascinating, Becca. Thanks for clarifying. All right, folks, we've got about 5 minutes left of the hour, so a last call for questions or sharing more about your program. Maybe if you're a little bit shy, this is your extra final push to come on and tell us what you've got going on. Allie, did you raise your hand and maybe I missed it at some point?
I did. I was going to say
Sorry
that
about that.
that's okay. We give eggs to our volunteers. We have about 20 rescue chickens, and we eat the eggs, and then all of our volunteers get a dozen eggs when they come. And then we have staff t-shirts too that they get after volunteering 10 hours. We're a lot smaller and less organized than all of you guys seem to be. I'm still doing it by texting people, hey, can you come volunteer tomorrow, kind of thing. So we don't really have a very good organized system. We do a background check and an application, and people just find us online or through word of mouth. But we don't really have a system for tracking everybody's hours other than a sign-in book, which we'd have to go through and figure out actually how many hours people have done. So we need to catch up. So that's why I was a little shy about talking, because I feel like everybody's a little more organized than I am.
I have another question. I don't think this can be answered because of the type question it is, but I'd be interested in seeing what kind of release of liability form that y'all, whoever, we're developing that right now. And so I'd be interested in just the literal wording and so forth that people are doing about release of liability for volunteers coming. Maybe I just need to email Becca or whoever. Anyway, we need advice right now about what to include on that and how to word it and so on.
Going along with that, liability insurance for volunteers. Does anyone have anything about that?
Yeah,
that's one of the things that stands in the way of doing volunteers.
Yeah.
I'm going to speak for us. I am very spoiled because I came into this organization with all of that having been figured out already. And I'd say our business manager is the one who handles all that. But I think a place at the CFN can be really helpful is maybe adding some of these materials to their sort of online base of resources, sort of what our policies look like that we share with volunteers, what those forms look like, what our insurance looks like too. I wish I could answer it right now because I don't actually know, but.
I will say that if you go on to the Care Farming Network website, and if you go under events in the beginning Care Farming page, there's a lot of resources that were shared on how to start a care farm, which actually include answers about insurance and policies like that. So I'll put the link in the notes here in a second.
Thanks, Andrea. Okay. Very last call for any quick questions or comments. Okay. Well, we'll end perfectly on time then. Thank you all for coming and contributing. It's been a lovely conversation. And Becca, thank you so much for presenting today and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience and inviting us to learn from one another. We're very grateful. We, as Andrea said in the chat, we'll be posting the recording to this in mid-February. And you can find all of our previous recordings at our site at the link that was provided. And we'll hope to see you again in March. Thanks again for coming, everyone, and have a great February.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
You
Great to
too.
meet you all.
Be well, everybody.